To order.
9 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule sous forme hybride.
Today's meeting will be held in a hybrid format as per House Order adopted on Thursday, November 25th, 2021, and members will be present in person or using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be posted on the House of Commons website. For your information, the webcast will always show the person who is speaking rather than the entire committee.
Situation, and in light of the recommendations from health authorities, as well as a directive of the Board of Internal Economy on Monday, February 14th, 2022, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person, for those here, are to maintain 2 meters physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated, and also must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer in the room. En tant que président,
as chair, I will enforce these measures throughout the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. For those who are participating virtually, I would like to state a few rules to follow. You can speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. All you have to do is click at the bottom of your screen on the little globe, and you can choose between the floor, English, or French. If interpretation services are interrupted, please notify me immediately. You can interrupt me, and we will make sure that interpretation is properly restored before resuming our work. For the members who are participating in person, please proceed as you normally would when the full committee meets in person in a meeting room. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by your name. If you are participating via Zoom, please click on the microphone icon to activate the sound of your microphone. For those of you who are in the room, your microphone will be controlled by the technicians who are in charge of procedures and verification. Finally, we remind you that all member comments must be directed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, make sure your microphone is muted. With regards to the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated speaking order for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person.
Challenges arise, please advise me. Please know that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Donc, conformément à l'article 108, paragraphe 3,
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083F and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the Francophone immigration to Canada and Quebec. I would like to welcome our witnesses. For the first hour, before we go any further, I just want to warn you that because of the votes in the House, with our fantastic team, the analysts, the clerk, the team, the technicians, we should be able to still have a 2-hour meeting. If, of course, we have consent. We're trying to get a second hour in. But we have a team here, and they're available to do the full meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I have a question. We just learned that there will be another vote at 4:49 that will be called, and the vote will be at 5:20. This is throwing a wrench in our plans. I would like to have a plan with our witnesses for both groups of witnesses because they're getting squeezed. I'm available to prolong longer, but 2 extra hours is not possible for me. I want to check with the other members. Well, we would continue until 6:15, not 2 full additional hours. Inaudible, please speak one at a time. Sorry to the witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen, if we have unanimous consent, when the bells ring, we can continue. It's only during the vote that we have to vote. Mr. Chair, I agree with you, but the problem here is that we're going to pass the first group, and then the second group, they don't know what to do. That's the problem. I would like to decide now, out of respect for our witnesses of both groups, do we shorten the time that we allot to the first group to make sure there's enough time for the second group, or the same amount of time? Does that work, Madam Clerk? Sounds good. Let's agree to go until 6. And some people might have to leave. And our rules allow us to continue for those of us who can stay. Unfortunately, I cannot stay past 6. My colleague has to leave at 5:50. So let's try and agree on 6. Yes, but what I'm saying is the rules allow us to continue to hear testimonials even without quorum. There's no vote, there's nothing going on other than the testimonials. So without further ado, gentlemen, we're going to aim for 5:15. I'm so sorry to the witnesses. We get really thrown around with these votes. So I'd like to welcome the witnesses from the first block. So the first hour on video conference. Speaking as an individual, Mr. Stéphane Hanfield, a lawyer with Hanfield and Associates, and Honorine Ngutchup, a support officer for the reception and integration of international students at the New Brunswick Community College. And from the Assemblée de la Francophonie de l'Ontario, we have the President, Carole Jolin, Executive Director, Peter Haminuk, and Brian Michaud, the Policy Analyst. So we're going to grant a maximum of 5 minutes to each of you. You can present your opening remarks. After this, we will move on to a round of questions. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. So we're going to start straight away with Mr. Hanfield. Mr. Hanfield, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting me. I've been a member of the Quebec Bar since 1992. I was a member of the Immigration and Refugee Board for 11 years. From 2012 to 2015, I was a lecturer at Cégep Saint-Laurent in the Administrative Technique Program, Immigration Consulting Services Program. I'm a member of the Quebec Immigration Lawyers Association and the Montreal Defense Lawyers Association. I practice exclusively in immigration law at Hanfield and Associates. I'm also an inspector with the Professional Inspection Services of the Quebec Bar. I collaborated on the book Démantèlement Tranquille, published by Québec Amérique in 2018. I published Immigration and Criminality in Canada, Quand l'expulsion devient inévitable, as well as Fatima, le parcours d'une réfugiée, that was also published by Éditions Wilson et Lafleur in 2021. Over the past 30 years, I have often been confronted with the non-respect of French language in immigration matters, and this before different authorities, whether it be the Immigration and Refugee Board, the Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, and Canada Border Services Agency. I have been able to observe that this situation has been growing for several years. For example, in the context of the hearing for a refugee claimant, the Immigration and Refugee Board tried to prevent me from proceeding in the language of the proceedings chosen by my client, namely French. The federal court had to intervene in order to enforce this choice of language of proceedings. This required time and energy that could have been invested in a much better way. The impossibility of communicating in French with the officers of the Immigration Commission Registry at the Toronto Regional Office when several files of refugee claimants from Montreal have been transferred to that office. As recently as yesterday, in a Montreal claimant's file, when the language of the proceedings was French, it was impossible to obtain the services of a French-speaking interpreter who could translate from French into the claimant's mother tongue. Only an English-speaking interpreter was assigned to the case. It is not uncommon to receive 12-line correspondence from Citizenship and Immigration Canada containing no less than 17 French mistakes. Just recently, I received written reasons for decisions from an Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada officer regarding an application for permanent residence involving humanitarian and compassionate considerations. It was entirely in English, whereas the request was made in French and the language of correspondence that was selected was French. Also, the reasons for decision of a pre-removal risk assessment officer were sent in English only when the application and the written arguments were submitted in French and the language of the proceedings chosen by the client was French. Receiving correspondence from an Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada officer in English only in a family reunification file where the file was submitted in French and the language of correspondence chosen was also French is common. Unfortunately, these do not seem to be exceptional or isolated cases, but rather a trend that is taking root. One can therefore raise the hypothesis that discrimination against Francophones in the field of immigration is real. In 30 years of practicing immigration law, I could go on with the list of examples where French has been scorned by Canadian immigration authorities in favor of English. Consequently, it seems to me more urgent than ever that the government intervene to ensure that French is respected before the various immigration authorities. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanfield. 3 minutes 30? That was very brief. I'm now going to give the floor to Honorine Ngouchoup for 5 minutes. Madame Ngouchoup, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Honorine Ngouchoup. I'm originally from Cameroon and arrived in Canada in 2016. As a French-speaking immigrant, I recognize myself as a Canadian because of my presence, my community involvement, and my love for Canada. I sit on provincial, regional, and local boards of directors. I have a full-time job, and I am a single mother of a Canadian-born boy. I started an initiative to give my region a taste of my culture and to allow newcomers to rediscover a little bit of what they left behind when they came to Canada, and thereby bring together all the Francophones and Francophiles of our beautiful country. By my personality, my background, my vision, and my entrepreneurship, I enrich the cultural content of my province. My achievements, my painting of murals for the Francophonie and to consolidate the peoples and experiences are numerous. My presence in the collective and international festival of slam poetry in Acadia and my show Francophone to promote the French language at Sommet FM for 4 years make me an actor of the expansion of the French language. My contribution in my community and in the province has been highlighted as exceptional. As such, I received a 2009 CCNB Campbellton Campus Leadership Award and a 2020 New Brunswick Multicultural Council Champion of Cultural Diversity Award in the individual category, and I continually offer additional support for community, artistic, and literary projects. Lately, I've heard a lot said about systemic racism. Am I experiencing it? That's the question. Would I recognize it at all times? I don't know, because this concept is new to me. Do I feel like I'm experiencing injustices as an immigrant? My answer is yes. Talking about my journey as an immigrant in 5 minutes is impossible, so I summarize myself in a spoken word poem. Final decision, September 22, 2021. We regret to inform you that you do not meet the eligibility requirements. Please see the final decision below. The news came as a shock, right in my head, right to my heart, that palpitates with fear at the sight of the last hour, which has just now come to pass. I want to know the reason for we regret, and then I click. I look and wish that it's just a snag. Request status denied. What do you mean refused? Who could have validated this refusal? Why I worked hard to deserve the accepted status? Click on the refusal letter. This page does not work. I refresh 10, 20, 100 times, dreaming that a miracle will turn the verdict upside down because tired, I feel exhausted to fill in the statements that one day will offer me citizenship. Why are they so merciless? Why do they mute themselves? Why do they ignore reality of our will? Do they doubt? Do they say that the truth sets us free? My truth did not make me white. Since my path is rich, it took me days to fill in my forms, to live my traumas, but they don't care. Denied request can't be my way out. Believe me, I am not guilty of the gap. I'm not guilty despite the statement. I am guilty of my desire to exist, guilty of my will, guilty of my thirst for freedom, above all, my guilt for my truth. The one that I nourished one day to want to see the day in this country where the days are good. The message to IRCC in making the next final decision, think that my son's future is not trivial, think that I haven't had a rest in a while, and think that this is already my home. One thing is certain, I have overcome migraines. I've suffered the worst of my pain. I have faith that at the end of my sorrows, I will come out a queen. Final decision, slam. To reach the target of 4.4%, IRCC must clear the French test. I failed a French test. I had to pay and redo the entire assessment before applying for permanent residency. This was a blow because I have always been told that my French was excellent. I had grown up, studied, and worked in French. And even if I pass, the 2-year validity of this test is an additional stress. Some IRCC services need to be decentralized, such as biometric registration and medical examination. Service Canada and hospitals in rural areas that welcome more and more francophones can offer us services to save us up to 8 to 10-hour trips for appointments that last between 5 and 40 minutes. Affordability is also a barrier for the enriching and involved francophones in Canada. Access to the IRCC website is a matter of luck, and talking to an agent on the phone is a feat. All of these issues are detrimental to the mental health of immigrants on the path to permanent residencies. We need concrete solutions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Gouchup. We will now give the floor to the Assemblée de la Francophonie de l'Ontario, probably the President, Carole Jolin. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello to everyone. I would like to first thank you for inviting the Assemblée de la Francophonie de l'Ontario to come talk to you about our work in French immigration in Canada. We represent nearly 744,000 Franco-Ontarians. I would also like to point out that I'm accompanied today by Executive Director Peter Homenuk and our policy analyst, Brian Michaud. We are pleased to see that the Government of Canada recognizes the importance of the Francophone immigration to Canada. The survival of the Franco-Ontarian community depends greatly on the immigration of French-speaking people. Also, I have seen initiatives that have been proposed in Bill C-13. We need to set targets. We need reporting. We need objectives for the new policy. The law is not doing what the government says it wants out of immigration. In the last few years, we decided to have a positive impact on welcoming and retaining newcomers. Let's talk about Pearson Airport welcoming, designating 3 Francophone welcoming communities in Ontario. However, we still have work to do. There are some challenges we'd like to highlight that are faced by the Franco-Ontarian community. In Ontario and all over Canada, immigration targets still haven't been met in regards to Francophone immigration. Furthermore, we see that international students are being refused their study permits, especially if they come from Africa. A few weeks ago, university presidents appeared before the immigration community. They said that the IRCC rejects up to 70% of applicants who would like to study in French language post-secondary institutions in Ontario. One of the reasons cited by the officers is that they did not consider wanting to study in French outside of Quebec as an acceptable pathway. At a time where we are seeing the implementation and transformation of Francophone universities in Ontario, these types of reasons are counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish in this province. Our universities, in addition to having to serve Francophone and Francophiles from here, are powerful recruitment tools for Francophone immigration. High school, inaudible. The right to French education is endorsed by the government of Canada and Ontario. The argument invoked by the IRCC agent is a slap in the face for our community and for all students who attend our post-secondary institutions. Additionally, it would appear that many students applying for visas are being turned down for indicating their desire to stay in Canada to work after finishing their studies. Francophone immigration nourishes and enriches our communities and increases the Francophone labor pool. We are currently experiencing a shortage of French-speaking workers in Ontario, exacerbated by the pandemic, and we believe that welcoming French-speaking international students to our institutions is an important part of the solution. Francophone international students that come to our institutions receive Canadian expertise and strengthen our minority language communities. The training they receive in Ontario would ensure the successful professional, economic, social, and cultural integration of these people if they decide to apply for permanent residency. Their success is a key element in the vitality of Ontario's Francophone community and for the future of the province. The current pandemic context has taken a toll on immigration across the country, and it is felt even more in the minority Francophone context in Ontario. The province has set a target of 5% for Francophone immigration, and the federal government has set a 4.4% target for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. It is clear that these two targets are far from being met. In the third quarter of 2021, in the midst of the pandemic, Ontario welcomed only a little over 2% of Francophone immigrants. And this alarming statistic applies to Canada as a whole. Yet Ontario has managed to reach 4.09% in 2020, which was encouraging. In recent years, the province of Ontario has been selecting more than 5% of Francophone immigrants through its only immigration program, the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. We believe that the federal government should give the Government of Ontario the power to select more immigrants through the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. In return, the province should commit to continue to select at least 5% of Francophone candidates. Thank you, Mr. Jolin. We will start with the first round of questions.
Each person will have 6 minutes for questions. I'll start with Mr. Joel Godin. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses for their patience in such exceptional circumstances with the vote in the House of Commons. My first question goes to Mr. Hanfield. Mr. Hanfield, you are on the ground. You have the privilege of working with clients, people who need help on immigration files. You said that the authorities do not respect the French language in immigration. You also talked about the federal court intervention. My question is simple. What should we do? Because it's something you experience every day. We know that all indicators and data have shown that Francophone immigration is not respected, in quotes, as you said. The data is there. You are experiencing this on the ground. Could you give us avenues for solutions to help solve this major problem, which is becoming exponential, in my opinion? Of course, before the Immigration Tribunal, this is a judicial court, so it's somewhat difficult for MPs to intervene directly at that level. However, before the department, IRCC, Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship, or the CBSA, the problem I have seen over the last few years when it comes to non-respect of the French language is that there are very few remedies to ensure respect of this language by the client. Besides a complaint with the Official Languages Commissioner, we don't have lots of options. And that is why I am recommending that there should be accountability for border service officials or IRCC. There's no consequence when a decision is received only in English in a file that was submitted in French, and where the client doesn't speak English at all. So it's disturbing and stressful for someone to receive a decision when it requires that the consequences be accepted is less. But when it's a refusal and the person doesn't understand the nature of that decision at all, imagine the additional stress that is added to a decision. Mr. Hanfield, I'm sorry I have to interrupt you. After listening to you, I have a very specific question. Before the 1st of March and after the 1st of March, there was a submission of a modernization of the Official Languages Act, and there's a section for Francophone immigration. Have you had the opportunity to read that act? No. Section 44.1, the policy involves objectives, targets, and indicators. A statement saying that the federal government recognizes that immigration is one of the factors that contribute to increasing the demographic weight of Francophone minorities in Canada. I could read the rest of the bill, but do you think that this act could be a tool for you and help your clients to access the French language in all fairness when defending their files? Unfortunately, with the little information you've just given me, I must say no in response to your question. The fact that we want to have thresholds for French language immigration, we want to use different mechanisms to reach those thresholds, will not ensure that services provided respect the French language, be it the department or the courts. I think we need more concrete measures to ensure that the French language is respected once and for all. And it's important for us to remind ourselves of this. It's not something that I've experienced recently. It's something that has gone on for many years. And unfortunately, it seems to be persisting for as long as there are no more concrete measures. Thank you, Mr. Hanfield. My next question will be brief and goes to Ms. Nukchup. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Like me, you must have noticed that in the news, there's information that more than 80% of Francophone immigration from Africa is denied. Applications are denied. And you said you expressed the desire that you are somewhat a victim of racism. Does this have to do with the origin of your country or because of the language you speak? You have 40 seconds. I can't say if it's because of the origin of my country or the language I speak, but one thing I know is that I felt that my file was botched. It was badly treated without any concrete reason. When I applied for permanent residency, the officer asked me to provide additional documents. And shortly after, I was told that my application had been denied because so clearly she had not taken the time to check my application to see if I'd provided the documents that were requested. Immediately, my application was denied. Thank you, Ms. Ngocham. 6 minutes are over. I'm sorry. I'm trying to interrupt you as politely as possible, but you may continue answering the questions when others ask you questions. The next person on the list, Mr. Drouin, you have the floor. 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would also like to tell Ms. Ngundunchu, I also hope I'm pronouncing your name well. You can continue. You can finish your comments. Immediately after I submitted my application, I was requested to provide more documents, and the officer told me that my application had been denied without even checking whether I had supplied the documents. And I did everything possible to submit the application, and shortly after again, that application was denied because I had not demonstrated that I was working in the category of the employment I had pointed out. I felt that the officer who processed my file did not make the necessary effort to call me or write to me to request information. What was worse is that we don't have a remedy. Another injustice I suffered was that my refusal letter is not in my account. So my application was denied, but I don't see the reasons why the application was denied. I made some requests. The officer was sent to me, but till now, the refusal letter is still not in my account. And then I made another application with a new program, and then I found the letter, which had been sent to me now by email. I realized that I made the same mistake. Now, we don't have any remedies to say, well, I made more than 50 calls, but I can't tell you if it's because of my origin or if it's because of the language I speak. But one thing for sure, when it comes to the language, I must say something. When I called to take medical appointments for my test, it was somebody who spoke English and did not make any effort to speak French. I tried to speak English as best I could, and then I eventually sent an email in English to get an appointment. I had to use Google Translate. Finally, I received an appointment. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. My question now goes to Mr. Jolin. You said that, I just want to make sure that I have the right statistics. If I understood you well, through the provincial designation program, the provincial nominee program, the objective was 5%, but they were able to get to 4.9% in 2020. 4.09 was for Francophone immigration in general. Through the program for immigrants, Ontario met its objectives, its targets. The target was 5%, and that was met because the target was 5.4% in 2018. Ontario could nominate more than 2,000 people he wanted to come to Ontario in 2021, and that's what we requested. And the Ontario government would like to choose 13,000 newcomers itself because there are possibilities for reaching the target through this program and even to exceed the target. So the government has shown that it can meet those Francophone immigration targets through this program. So the government of Canada should provide the government of Ontario more opportunities to meet those targets. I don't have any position for and against, but your arguments are good. Do you believe, when I do the math, we want to accept about 400,000 or 450,000 immigrants by 2023. So that's about 16,000 Francophone immigrants if we go by the 4% target by 2023. So your solution is to get to that target, provide the provincial governments with the tools to enable them to help the federal government attain those objectives. That's one thing, because the target, the 4.4% target, is that still relevant for Francophones outside Quebec? The organization is completing a study on that, and that study is based on data from Statistics Canada and analysis that were validated by that organization. We want to publish the study before we take an official position to know how far we need to go when we are dealing with the 4.4%, but we need to do better. And on the ground, I don't remember the name of the professor from New Brunswick, but what he told me was that it's very difficult to attract Francophones when provinces or Canada have their kiosks. I'm not targeting anyone, but Quebec is here with a huge kiosk. When they organize conferences and places to attract immigrants, Quebec has a big kiosk, but you have New Brunswick and Ontario with a small kiosk saying that, well, we also speak French. And of course, the other communities. I'm sorry, Mr. Drouin, you have 30 seconds left. The bell will sound very soon. Do we have unanimous consent to continue the vote on the screen? I see my colleagues on the screen. We continue 30 seconds, Mr. Drouin. Thank you very much. My point is that irrespective of the act or the legislation that we have on the ground, do you have testimonies on what is happening, be it in countries where we could attract Francophone immigrants? What happens on the ground? There are many people from Francophone immigration from Africa, and there's a flagrant absence of visa offices. Thank you, Mr. Jolin. You can continue with the other countries. I'm sorry. I must just do this. The next person, Second Vice President, Mr. Mario Bolio, you have the floor, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question goes to Mr. Hanfield. What you're explaining is that sometimes you have prohibited at the Immigration Board or court to plead in French, even if that is what the client requested. That's the immigration court in Montreal, Quebec. Is that an exception? Or is this something that is frequent? In your opinion, is this an exception or something that happens all the time? I would like to say it's an exception. Unfortunately, that's not the case. These are situations that happen all the time when we are prohibited to plead in French. I talked of a case where we had to present a challenge, and the court had to be told that it had to respect the language chosen by the client. In this case, it was French. The trial had to take place in French. In another case, where I insisted before the court to work in French, the court wanted everything to be done in English for its own reasons. I insisted. I reminded them of the famous federal court decision. I was told, we know you, we know that you're a troublemaker. Subsequently, we had a trial only in French. Recently, in Montreal, there are many asylum seekers with cases. I remember the Oxfam cases in Quebec. There are many cases that are transferred to the regional office in Toronto. Unfortunately, it's difficult in some cases to talk with a clerk from those of regional offices in French. In one case, we were told, well, you insist on talking to a French language clerk, we'll call you back. And we've been waiting for months for somebody to call us back in French. So unfortunately, this seems to be a trend. Thank you. This seems unbelievable. Even though I'm aware of the file, it's something that I've experienced in the past. I tried to put some pressure to help for you to be able to plead in French. How do you explain that? How can we explain this, that in Quebec, somebody refuses that a trial be done in French? What reasons can explain this, in your opinion? It's difficult for me to explain this way of working. Same for the fact that in 2021, 2022 in Quebec, in IRCC, you have unilingual English positions. I think this is a message. We need to send a message, whether it's in Quebec or in the federal government. Immigration should be in French in Quebec. It's unbelievable. The federal court decision, you said that at the beginning it wasn't necessary to work in French because there was no prejudice caused, no harm was caused. What was the result of that federal court judgment? The federal court was clear that it's not in court or up to the department's representative, IRCC, or the Immigration Board to choose the language of the procedure. The client has the obligation to decide to plead in French or English, but it's a right that the client has, not a right that belongs to anyone else. So where the client wants to work in French, the court must go by that desire and offer services in French. So the documents should be submitted in French. And of course, if the person or client doesn't master any of the two languages and things have to be translated in the mother tongue, a French interpreter who also speaks the mother tongue should be assigned to that case. That was the federal court conclusion, luckily. Do you think that if there was political will, a will by the administration of IRCC to allow everyone to plead in French, something that should be their right, according to the Official Languages Act and according to the French Language Charter, do you think that will be effective? Is it one way? Is there a way of making those immigration officers respect French? Well, I'll split your question into two. You have the courts, the Immigration Board, they need clear directives from the minister that goes right to the president of the board and the different commissioners in the different sections of the court to make sure that the French language is respected and also the choice of the language is respected. On the other hand, within the department, there should be clear measures to ensure that immigration officers respect the language chosen by the client and that there be accountability. As I said before, you have 15 seconds. The only remedy the client has is to lodge a complaint with the Official Languages Commissioner, where we know what obtains after that. Thank you very much, sir. Very interesting. Now I'll give the floor to Manitoba, Ms. Nikki Ashton. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thanks to all our witnesses who are with us today. I find your testimony really overwhelming. We are all aware of the file and some of the issues, but what you've shared with us today is very disturbing. It brings to mind the idea that Canada says it wants Francophone immigrants, but services are not provided to help them come here and stay here. So we really need to work on your proposals. Thank you for the messages that you've shared.
Pour Madame Ngouchoup. Madame Ngouchoup, les poids des francophones en Acadie et au Nouveau-Brunswick diminuent comme à plusieurs endroits au Canada. Moncton a une université francophone.
Excusez-moi, j'entends plutôt la traduction en anglais. Je ne sais pas.
Sorry. Mrs. Knut, can you hear me? Yes? Now, if I speak like this, can you hear me in English? Can you hear the interpretation in English? I'm on French. I'm on English. No. Can you hear me? Can you hear the interpretation? Moncton has a Francophone university, and we know that Canada refused systematically to accept African Francophone immigrants, and Canada refused to accept 4.4% of Francophone immigrants. That's been decided almost 20 years ago. Do you think that there is an inconsistency between the target given and the refusal of accepting Francophone immigrants? I think that there's a big inconsistency, given the fact that there are a lot of Francophones who are not permanent residents. When we look at the way the language tests are assessed, you have to take the languages test, and these tests are assessed in France. When you take a language test, personally, the way I was assessed, I had the impression that I had a very good master of the language. I'm not the only person in that case. I know many other people like me who have worked in French and lived in French countries, and their application was refused. I think that if we want to defend, in fact, Francophonie, it doesn't work. If the fact that many Francophones live in remote regions and they cannot provide services, some people cannot, in fact, go and take the test because they have to travel. I traveled during the winter. I risked my life, and I came out of this language test with a very serious trauma. We are many people who work in French, who have lived in Canada, and we have problems with this language test. Previously, the member said that, I don't remember who said that, but if you decide to come to Canada, you have to show that you will go back afterwards. It's true. You really have to show that you won't stay in Canada, even if we know that we want these people in Canada. So when will they restore the service so that it be more consistent versus the targeted service? I don't know what to say. Thank you very much, and thank you for having shared your personal experience. obviously very difficult. You talked about the fact that these tests were not free and that it was hard for international students, and we need international students to reverse the weight of Francophone students. If, in fact, we were to eliminate these obstacles, we would get more international students. Yes, I want to talk as a former student because nowadays I don't have the right to talk as a professional representing my college. As a student, well, French is a major hurdle, and I'm still traumatized. If we eliminate this hurdle of the language, knowing that the person is already a Francophone, it would be really a relief. Without adding that the cost of taking the test is really enormous, and it's a big challenge if you want to pay again. And I think that eliminating these obstacles would make the difference. Already it's difficult for people living here. Imagine for people who want to come. Thank you very much for the work you do, even if you do not represent the institution for which you work. My next question is for Mr. Jolin. Mr. Jolin, witness coming from the Francophone community of Sarnia, said that there were no services in French for newcomers, since they have to choose between the French and the English, and allophones choose mainly English. Should we do more to offer services in French to newcomers? Should we even offer courses in both languages? Obviously, we have to provide courses to allow people who want to learn French that they know they can have courses. I think a lot has to be done. We have 2 official languages in the country, and this is what we've been asking for a long time, that people can have access to study in the language of their choice. If they want to study one of our official languages, that they should be offered the possibility to do so. Thank you, Mr. Jolin. Now, so I will offer 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, taking into account the political groups. Next question, Mr. Jacques Gourde. You have 4 minutes. I will be very brief. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing, and thank for their testimony. I've been a member for 16 years, and for 16 years at my office, we've been helping people with the Department of Immigration. I'm not reassured after what I heard from you, because it shows to me how it is complicated. It's not only in my riding that we have problems, it's everywhere in Canada. I'm really appalled by this because we are dealing with human beings, we deal with human beings, and we really break their heart, and this is very sad. My question is for Mr. Handfield. There are cases where people should complain, and I think that they don't know where to go to file a complaint. If you had an advice to give us, what could be done? What process or mechanism should be put in place so that people who feel hurt could go? Very relevant question. As I said previously, apart from the federal court in some cases where the decision comes from the tribunal, I mentioned it and I repeat it. It's the accountability. There are no consequences for a Canada immigration officer to give his decision in a language other than that chosen by the client, apart from filing a complaint with the Official Languages Commission. We don't have any solid lever to reverse this trend. So unfortunately, I don't have a panacea to give you this afternoon. If I had one, obviously I would have mentioned it and shared it with the various parliamentarians. I don't know whether other interveners would have concrete solutions to offer for that. But unfortunately, I've been asking myself this question for a long time, and I never found a solution. I would like to ask a question to Mrs. Honorine. You talked about the French language test, and I noted that your French was flawless. It's not the first time that I'm told that the French language test seems to be very difficult. That myself, being a Quebec francophone, I don't think I could even pass the test. Now, do you think that the level of this French test is exaggerated? And do you think that we use this type of test to refuse people? Yes. I think that the level of the test was very high, but I feel that the problem comes with the corrections, because there are tests or parts of the test I don't even know why I flunked. So yes, there is a problem for someone who doesn't have a good French. I read the test, and I noticed that, in fact, the level was not right. Do you have any suggestions you could give us for measures that could be taken if you feel that you haven't been understood by the immigration? You could, for example, create a site to receive complaints, because sometimes if you could create a site, a page for where people could go and shared the negative experiences they went through, this could help for you to collect experiences and cases and then put some solutions in place. You still have 20 seconds. So we'll go to the following questions. Mrs. Arietta Baga. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like, first of all, to thank our witnesses today for appearing. And I would like to tell Mrs. Honorine that it's okay if your son is there on the screen. He must be interested in what's going on. So, Mrs. Honorine, we know that 60% of Francophone in the world are in Africa. What kind of suggestions could you give the government? Because we have very ambitious plans to welcome Francophones. I live in a city that is completely Anglophone, so I would like to have more Francophone in my city. 2 points for you, Mr. Jolin, and for you, Mrs. Honorine, concerning the type of measures that could be taken that would allow us to increase the welcoming of Francophone immigrants, because we know that 60% of immigrants come from Africa. Yes, and the great majority of people who are Francophone live in Africa. What's important is that the federal government is very little present in Africa. For example, I know that there's an office in Senegal that serves some 12 countries. So it's difficult for people to travel a long time to go to the office in Senegal. So we need to increase our presence. We say that we want more Francophone immigration in Canada, so we have to take the means to do so. And this is something that has to be done, have more offices. In sub-Saharan Africa, sometimes people have to cross 6 countries to reach an office. It's not serious, and it goes against what we want to do, because we say that we want a Francophone immigration. We want to do anything or everything to reach our targets. But on the other hand, people who want to come here cannot reach us. So we have to have more offices. I mentioned previously the question of the selection of immigrants by Ontario. Ontario has reached its objectives of 5% in this particular case, and what we're asking for is that Ontario can have more immigrants. We're talking of 1,850 for 2021, but Ontario would like to welcome 13,000 immigrants. And if Ontario, in fact, went beyond this target of 5%, it should have the right to have more. Yes, what we would like to is that these immigrants could choose another province at Quebec. For example, in London, where I live, we would like to have more Francophone immigrants or newcomers. Mrs., could you propose something? First solution would be to remove this note that we have to prove that we want to go back to the country after your studies are over. When you have to provide that note, well, it's difficult for someone to say that he wants to go back to his country of origin when he wants to stay in the country where he studied. We know that in school institutions, we know that in universities or post-secondary institutions, all those who are there and can speak French. So we have to see also the way to assess French language. If we're expecting a certain level in French, you have reached that level, and do these people really need this level of French to immigrate? 10 seconds. A last comment. First of all, thank you very much for this comment. I agree with you. So we need, well, there's a shortage of manpower. So we have to use these Francophone immigrants as well. 2 minutes. So Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. Thank you very much. On the one hand, what we see is that there really seems to be a systemic problem, as we said, for immigration. And we heard this same problem during our last hearing. The problem existed. People didn't seem to know why. If the problem can't be identified from the very beginning, it's very difficult to think that it's going to improve. At the Bloc Québécois, we would like to patriate all the immigration powers to Quebec, to the province of Quebec. We would like to know what the witnesses think of this. Mr. Jolin, you seem to think that Ontario should have more power in terms of immigration. So what do you think, in fact, for the province of Quebec? Maybe the others also from Ontario or Quebec. Do you think that the provinces should have more powers in terms of immigration? If we speak for the province of Quebec, Mr. Beaulieu, it would be ideal because we see in some files that the delays are very long. Why? Because we have the Ministry of Integration and Immigration that has to assess the applications. And then also they have to be assessed by IRCC. If the applications were to be assessed by only one level, one order of government, this would reduce considerably the process delays. This solution could be put in place. And at the same time, I think that at this time, there wouldn't be any question of respecting the language of the procedure because obviously the language would be French. So another round of question by Mrs. Nikki Ashton, 2 minutes. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask a question to Mr. Jolin. Mr. Jolin, you confirm, or rather, you confirmed that the target of 4.4% were not reached. We asked the Department of Immigration a few days ago if they intend to put in place another target, and we were told that this target remains 4.4%. If we want to protect the demographic weight of Francophone communities in Ontario and elsewhere in Canada, should the government set such a target? Well, there's a study in depth has been put in place to study that question. We're waiting for the publication of the study to make a final statement on the targets, but it's obvious that we can do more. It's obvious because at 4.4%, we have a lot more to do. In Ontario, our target is 5%, and for 10 years, we haven't been able to reach it. So our demographic weight is very much impacted by that. And we would like to reach that target. This 5% target has to be, and so we think that our target should be increased.
Est-ce que vous pensez que le gouvernement fédéral devrait...
Rapidly, do you think that the federal government should put in place a special immigrant program for example, Francophone minority communities such as mine in Manitoba? It's important that in the bill that was filed yesterday that a policy of Francophone immigration be developed, that there should be accountability. And also mentioning the figures and the targets. That's all. First of all, I would like to thank our witnesses. Mrs. Gnutschub and Mr. Hanfield, thank you very much for the experience you shared with us. So for people who are used to us, Mr. Jolin, Mr. Michaud, thank you. Very good testimonies that enlightened us very much. We will suspend the hearing to come back after the vote. The second part of the testimonies, those who are waiting, we will come back.
Please forgive us. This is the thing with our democracy. We have to get delays from the Parliament. Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry to bother you. I would like to get unanimous consent to table a motion about the operating budget for the study that is being started today. I think you've all received a document. I would suggest that we approve this motion. We have unanimous consent. Okay, so back to where I was. I would like to welcome our witnesses for the second hour, or what's left of it, from the Centre de Santé Communautaire du Grand Sudbury, Mr. Moïse Zahoui, Immigration Services Coordinator, and Carl Blackburn from the Conseil du Patronat du Québec, who we've seen very recently. So, Mr. Zahoui, you have 5 minutes to make some opening remarks. You have the floor. Hello, I'm Moïse Zahoui, Immigration Services Coordinator at the Greater Sudbury Community Health Centre, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about our local reality. The Centre de Santé Communautaire du Grand Sudbury is also the main agent of welcoming Francophone Community Project in Sudbury, as well as a direct service provider for newcomers. Let's talk about targets first. Prior to the start of the pandemic, May 2020, is one of the 14th Francophone welcoming communities and was receiving more and more Francophone immigrants. But when the pandemic was declared, the CSCGS had more than 170 individuals or families identified as newcomers among its clientele, not counting all the international students, workers, and temporary visas and asylum seekers. Between 2018 and 2020, 2 studies were conducted on the status of the situation in Sudbury, and it was found that at the time, very few services for newcomers were available in French. Of the 177 Francophone newcomers who participated in these studies were young, under 46 years of age. They were mostly permanent residents, 57%, or international students, 36.3%, or from Sub-Saharan Africa, the Maghreb, and the Caribbean. They came to Sudbury to study, 83%, family reunification 10%, and work 7%. According to our data, Sudbury was the first destination for international students, but was a second migration destination for immigrants with permanent resident status, mostly from Ontario and Quebec. 31% of respondents came directly to Sudbury. 25% came from Montreal, 14% from Toronto, and 11% from Ottawa. In general, the income of these newcomers was very low. Almost 3/4 of the respondents had an income of less than $30,000 per year. 75% of the respondents were in school and combined it with part-time or full-time work. They had very little or no English language skills. Often, they were uninformed about the services that were available, and these newcomers were faced with isolation, stress, and discrimination. How do these findings help us understand the failure to reach our targets? We don't have to look any further. Before the pandemic, we were failing to meet our targets because newcomers to Greater Sudbury were not able to settle, find employment, and live in French. So they were leaving Ottawa. They were leaving for Ottawa, Toronto, or Montreal. The DWI and direct service projects that allowed us to hire a team of 4 people specifically to address the settlement needs and socioeconomic integration challenges of the above-mentioned newcomers. These projects have also allowed us to strengthen the local presence of certain partners such as the Société économique de l'Ontario and the Conseil de la coopération de l'Ontario. The only problem is that all these resources arrived in the midst of a pandemic. During the pandemic, health restrictions and the closure of Canada's borders made it very difficult for newly established settlement services and welcoming community projects to work. So we turned to our existing clients, permanent residents who arrived within the past 5 years, international students, and temporary workers on closed or open visas. How can the government work to maintain or increase the demographic weight of Francophones in minority communities? The promotion of Francophone immigration is essential. We therefore ask the government to renew the projects initiated at the beginning of the pandemic so that they can prove themselves to demonstrate the impact of investments in the Francophone minority communities. Make it mandatory to refer Francophone clients to Francophone settlement services while respecting their choices. Anchor the target of 4.4% Francophones in all immigration programs. Adapt the Canadian government's international recruitment campaign to the realities of Francophone minority communities, available jobs, and language situation. Open offices and pre-departure services in sub-Saharan African countries that represent the largest pool of Francophone immigration, develop strategies to shorten the processing time for permanent residence, work permits, and citizenship applications, which would provide a greater stability for applicants. Restore regional immigration services, the IRCC offices in Sudbury. What I didn't mention is that we have to make sure that French language service providers have agents in the departments that are primarily Francophone. I thank you. I'm ready to take your questions. In less than 5 minutes, Mr. Zawi, I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Blackburn. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'm Carl Blackburn, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Conseil du Patronat du Québec. I'm accompanied by Denis Hamel, Vice President, Labor Force Development Policies. Our organization was created in 1969, and it's a confederation of nearly 100 sector-based associations and several corporate members that represent the interests of more than 70,000 employers of all sizes and in all regions of Quebec, from the private and para-public sectors. This is the second time in as many months that I've had the pleasure of addressing this community to talk about the role that the Government of Canada should play in promoting French, but this time through immigration. Immigration in general, and Francophone economic immigration in particular, is a major concern for employers. As you know, our aging demographics will not allow us to fill all the vacancies that will become available over the next 10 years. Even if we succeed in increasing the participation of unemployed people in the workforce and the experienced workers and people from underrepresented groups, the fact remains that approximately 1/4 of current and future job vacancies can only be filled through immigration. In this regard, it is clear that the current situation is unsustainable. The number of vacancies is at an all-time high. There are currently more vacancies than people on employment insurance in Quebec. Immigration programs are running at a standstill, and the frustration of employers and prospective immigrants is growing due to unprecedented delays. In April 1991, the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec agreed to share jurisdiction over immigration in order to provide Quebec with new means of preserving its demographic weight in Canada, while advocating the consolidation and enrichment of Canada's cultural and social heritage, taking into account its federal and bilingual character. It is sad to note that more than 30 years after the Canada-Quebec Accord on Immigration and Temporary Admission of Aliens, the Gagnon-Tremblay-McDougall Accord, came into effect, immigration has become a political issue that has distanced governments from their respective obligations. This dual administration has led to political friction. Departments pass the buck on who is responsible for long processing times. Fingers are regularly pointed at Quebec, which is responsible for determining the number of permanent immigrants entering its territory, as the cause of the backlog of files on the desks of federal officials. At the same time, the federal government has recently admitted to voluntarily slowing down the processing of skilled worker files in Quebec, citing a large inventory of applications, while Quebec had, at the same time, reduced its admission targets. This inconsistency is striking and, I would say, shocking. It's incredibly evident in the case of foreign students. On the one hand, immigration officers routinely refuse study permit applications from Francophone students, citing immigration regulations which stipulate that applicants must leave Canada upon completion of their studies. At the same time, Quebec, through its Québec Expérience program, encourages foreign students to seek permanent status after graduation. How can we sort this all out? What is particularly troubling is that Francophone students seem to be the object of increased zeal on the part of immigration officers when it comes to examining their files. The refusal rate for for study permits applications has reached 60% in Quebec, while it has never exceeded 45% in the rest of Canada. Quebec and the Canadian Francophonie are penalized because the origin of Francophone recruitment pools, which are mostly in Africa. Algeria, Senegal, and Cameroon, for example, are among the top 6 countries of origin of international students in Quebec and have experienced refusal rates of over 80% in 2020 and 2021. In the other provinces, India accounts for a large portion of the international student pool, but its refusal rate is much lower than for these French-speaking African countries. A significant gap was identified last May by your colleagues on the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, who recommended that the government provide additional funding to visa processing centers in Francophone African countries to increase the number of staff to expedite the processing of biometric data and student permits. Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. You can continue with the questions. Because of our time limitations, we have colleagues that have to leave and participate in other committees, so our time is limited and there's votes. So we're doing our best. We've all agreed that we're going to do one round of questions for each party, 6 minutes each. We're going to start with shared time between Joël Godin, First Vice Chair. You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being so patient. We're so sorry that it's been so unpredictable. This is the way it is in politics. My questions are for the Conseil du Patronat du Québec. Mr. Blackburn, you said it in your opening remarks. There's something very particular about immigration. In Quebec, we're trying to keep our people here, and in Canada, we're forcing students to leave. I understand this in a context where we have full employment. But right now, we're experiencing labor shortages. Mr. Blackburn, can you identify the percentage that would respond to the labor shortfall? How much does immigration represent compared to training? I'm talking about immigration and Francophone immigration specifically. Can you paint a picture for us and tell us what your 70,000 employers have as figures in their mind? What do we need to help our manufacturers? I'll give you some numbers that come from the Labor Department. They're from 2017. We were looking to compensate for the retirement of 1.4 million workers. 50% of them could be replaced by students, people who are currently in training. They could go for complementary training. 25% could come from people that are a little bit separate from the work market. For example, people that have disabilities, women in certain fields, people from First Nations communities, people who would like to, people who have been into the justice system. Another percentage could come from automation and robotics. The number in 2017 was 64,000 people per year. However, we've only been able to attract much less than these 64,000 immigrants per year. And we can see from the targets that the government of Quebec has set, we will not be able to reach these targets. And then when we see the new data that was provided by the Government of Canada about immigration thresholds for the next few years, if we had to prorate it to the Quebec population, it would be 98,000 immigrants that should come into Quebec each year. So you can imagine that we're far off the target. Mr. Blackburn, if I remember correctly, in Quebec it's between 40 and 46,000. The objectives are higher, but yes, approximately. In 2018, it was 44,000. In 2019, it was a bit more. And it's always the same story. There's been an acceleration of file processing for applicants who are already here in Quebec. So these are not new arrivals. And what's particularly interesting here, when we think about the numbers that you've given us, is that the numbers are going down. And if we want to meet the demand, we need to reach 98,000 new immigrants in Quebec. So I understand that there are processing delays, about 26 to 27 months. But then on top of it, we're not bringing over enough francophones to meet the demands of our population decrease. That's exactly right. Can you tell us what the solution is, or one path to a solution to rise to the challenge? On a human perspective, it's pretty particular. Francophone immigration from Africa, as you mentioned, you used very specific language. You say the federal government is seeking to slow the processing of these files. How can we force the federal government? We had the Department of Immigration come to this committee, and I have to say that their testimony was very disappointing. So what's an avenue to a solution that we can put in our report to inspire the government and give Quebec the tools it needs? And this will serve Quebec, but it will also serve Francophone immigration in Canada. Well, before, I would like to ask my colleague, Mr. Hamel, to answer, but I'd like to venture into some more political terrain. There seems to be political will, but unfortunately, the administrative machine is not keeping up. So we just need to put our money where our mouth is. And I would like to give my colleague the opportunity to give you some concrete examples. You have 30 seconds. Mr. Blackburn, I'm so sorry, Mr. Hamel. What you're saying is that there's political will, but I don't know if you were able to see the new bill that was tabled yesterday about immigration. We're not necessarily touching the issue here. There's some things that were included in it, but we didn't include mechanisms and tools in place that would allow for short-term results. I'm so sorry, Mr. Godin. This is my job. I have to watch the clock. The next speaker will be Mr. Marc Serré. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a warm thank you to our witnesses today. My first question is for Mr. Zaoui. First of all, thank you for the work that you're doing with the Centre Communautaire de Santé in Sudbury, with the education and health programs that you have in the downtown. I really thank you. I would like to address you, Mr. Zaoui. You studied at Collège Boréal. You worked in the Réseau de Sport Immigration du Nord de l'Ontario, and you've worked in health, so you were a student, and you also have working experience. Let me focus in on your recommendations for the federal government on two fronts. One, recruiting. What can we do as a federal government to attract more Francophone immigrants and bring them to Sudbury? And two, let's talk about retention. So there's the socioeconomic front, jobs, homes, health. Some of these are of provincial jurisdiction, but I would like to know your recommendations. So you talked about visa offices. Do you have any other recommendations for these two projects? For visa offices, it's very important. We know that in the north of Ontario, there are many people who are coming from sub-Saharan Africa, but when they get here, they have so many challenges. There's no visa office. Sometimes people have to go from Western Africa and have to go in the same region, but in Senegal, and this is very difficult for them. In terms of recruitment, we have specific needs in Northern Ontario. Needs vary from region to region. So we have to make sure that we match the people with the needs that are there in the field. For us, it would be useful for the government to have policies that are based on local needs so that we can attract people that can meet the local needs and we can integrate them right away as soon as they arrive. Let's talk about specific recommendations. One of the criteria for students to come is that they have to go back after they finish school. Is this a barrier? Should the federal government remove this requirement? Yes, this is absolutely a barrier. There are people who come here, they're very interested, they start contributing to our communities, they're essential players, and then unfortunately, as soon as they finish school, they can't contribute anymore. They can't bring their energy, so we have them, we see them, and then we lose them. If we have to reach a 4.4 target, for a 4.4% target, we have to make sure that we let them stay. Can you explain to the committee, we've been talking about the north of Ontario. The Immigration Office closed its doors in 2012 in Sudbury, and that's 90% of Ontario's geography is in northern Ontario. So why do you think it's important to have an immigration office in Sudbury? Well, it's very important. As I said, it's the capital of northern Ontario. We make so much effort to attract newcomers. We help them with all the processes, even to get their permanent residency. And then these people have to drive for hours to go to southern Ontario. You need money to do that. You need to get a hotel room. It's complicated. I don't want to remind you that we had a family of asylum seekers who lost their lives, unfortunately, through this. To us, this is critical. To have an office in our area would make all of this easier. It would help us integrate our newcomers more easily. Earlier, the Association francophone de l'Ontario said that one of their recommendations was to grant immigration powers to the province of Ontario. Do you have any reactions to this? Do you have any suggestions? With your interaction with the provincial nominee program, do you have any feedback you can share based on your interaction with the provincial government, things that are going well that you can share with the federal government, or do you think we should transfer powers to the province? It would be very interesting, but the interpreter would like to mention that the sound is just cut out. We're in a minority situation, and there are challenges that come with that. Let me say something simple. We lose so many Francophones that come here because they don't know about the services that are available. So if the province takes on this task, we need to make sure that there's communication and that they assess what the needs are. We need to make sure also that Anglophone service providers refer Francophones to us. We have to make sure that we give people the choice of getting their services in French. And then the ones who decide that they want to be supported in the language of their choice, they should be able to get those services in the language of their choice. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Serré. I'm going to interrupt you now. The next speaker is...
Notre deuxième vice-président, M. Beaulieu, pour 4 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. I want to thank our two witnesses. Mr. Blackburn, I think you did a very good presentation. As a manager at the Council of Quebec Employers, if your company doesn't meet its targets year after year, what do you do? Well, we change the process. Microphone is off. We often say that it's important to have objectives that can be put down in numbers and evaluated. But in our context, we are not meeting our targets year after year. Either the targets are poorly identified or the internal process is poorly organized. And if that is the case, then the process should be revised. It would appear that we should say that Francophone immigration should be revised or criteria be modified. What we're saying with temporary permits, student permits, as you said, in Francophone countries, African countries, the refusals are high, the refusal rate is high. But for students from the same countries that have to go to Francophone universities, the refusal rates are higher than for Anglophone universities. This means that there's a problem somewhere. I think somewhere there's a lack of political will. It's not just a matter of the legislation. I think we can take measures if we really want to do something. The way you've said it, Ms. Abolu, I think there's really a problem. And this problem is hurting Francophone immigrations. A few weeks ago, when we met for the first time, I talked a lot about the will to develop economic Francophonie with our partners from many Francophone countries in the world. There were more than 27 Francophone countries in August 2021 in Paris to launch the grouping of Francophone entrepreneurs. And the desire we have is to set up an organization that will enable this economic Francophonie throughout the world. And at the end of March, we will officially launch a new global organization which strives to promote and prioritize economic Francophonie, and the Quebec Employers Council will play a critical role within this organization. And this will surely be an important element to enable Canada within this global Francophonie to play an important role as a gateway for all Francophone entrepreneurs in the world, and could also be a stepping stone for all those who want to develop economic Francophonie in the world. So this new organization would help us. But as you've clearly said, Ms. Abolu, if there are things that are not working right now in the offices of the federal employees, then they should be, well, there is a lawyer, a witness who says there's a need for accountability at some point. It makes no sense to continue the way we are. We received people from the immigration services. They're in denial, and they were not able to provide us with one factor to explain the difficulties they have. So somewhere, there seems to be a lack of political will amongst the senior officials, or there's something that is an obstacle. We'll see. We see the same things outside of Quebec with Francophone immigration. Universities in Ontario, in the Francophone universities, the refusal rate is higher. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Abolu. The last questions will be asked by Ms. Ashton. 4 minutes, Ms. Ashton. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our witnesses. My question goes to Mr. Zawe. We heard what happened with the university, with the Laurentian University and the Sudbury University, and we want to make sure that there's post-secondary education in French available in Ontario, as well as in the Francophone regions in Canada. Your testimony focused on the role of students in the community. For the Francophone community in Sudbury to receive particularly foreign students, what role should post-secondary education play, like the Sudbury University? As you must have seen in the statistics I provided, the number of people that come here to Sudbury come primarily for education. So it's a primordial role because that is what attracts these international students. Sometimes they come from their countries of origin, and it's also a source of attraction for permanent residents because people focus on major centers like Toronto and Montreal. The loss of the Laurentian University was a great problem for us. So a Francophone university will be a solution. It's crucial. It's a pillar for us to retain or keep people in Sudbury. Thank you very much. That's a reality we are very well aware of. For example, in Winnipeg, we have the Saint Boniface University, and that's something that applies to many communities. My next question is based on access to healthcare services for Francophones, and that's a real problem. Francophone immigration may contribute to the recruitment of qualified staff in health care. For example, to offer all Francophones decent healthcare services. What strategy would you envisage in this field? First of all, acknowledging the credentials. We've seen this. Usually people who come here, well, I don't want to dare say that they are poorly assessed, but I think that there's a problem with the evaluation, particularly when you are recognizing their credentials and transfer of skills, because that's what it's about as well. We need to rethink the policy. I think the previous witnesses said this as well. We need to rethink the way we assess these immigrants who come and who have a lot to offer, but they don't have the opportunities to do so because of the system. That's the problem. People come. Let's take the case of the pandemic. We saw how these people were able to contribute to the society, and they provided essential help during a critical time. So that's all I can say. We need to rethink the policies. Within the system, there should be some flexibility and mechanisms to enable us reach our targets. 30 seconds. Thank you. Finally, what do you recommend to the federal government to offer French language services to newcomers, particularly those who are far away from the urban centers? Should I answer your question? Yes, if you want to share your thoughts. Yes, first of all, the government should provide more resources because in remote areas we don't have enough services. As we said before, we don't have IRCC offices, so we have problems. We must think about providing resources to those communities because we need them. Thank you, Ms. Azawi. Thank you, Ms. Ashton. Thank you, witnesses. Very interesting. Ms. Azao, I think it's your first appearance before our committee. You're welcome. It was very interesting. Mr. Blackball and Mr. Hamel, it was a pleasure to see you again. If you think that you have more information that the committee should have received and we don't have enough time, please do not hesitate to send them to us by in writing. Send us your information in writing. Send it to the clerk. The information will be shared with all our members. Please do not hesitate to do that if you think that you have some information which could help us. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, colleagues. It was a great meeting. Later, the meeting is adjourned.